See, the most dangerous fighter is the guy who's intelligent and motivated. And if he's trained and unleashed on a terrain of his own choosing, he's the most dangerous man. And as the American Special Forces said, right man in the right job is the most devastating weapon. And the Tamil Tiger was exactly that. And at that stage, the accord had been signed. So Jayawardene said, hand them over to us, the Sri Lankan army. The LTT said, don't do it. They'll be tortured, they'll be killed. But because the accord had been signed, it was decided to hand them over to the Sri Lankan army. They asked that a last meal be given to the boys, and they passed cyanide capsules inside. And all 17 of them committed suicide, chewed on their cyanide capsules. I know your problem, Sher Khan. You've been attacked by a leopard. He says, oh, forget that. And I said, no, listen to me. That leopard, because you fuckers don't come down and fight. You bastards are sitting up there or hanging around in the villages. We've trained these leopards. They're trained by us. Now these leopards are going to come hunting for you.
Military-themed episodes of the Ranveer Show are always well received. This one features Abhay Sapru sir, one of the most eloquent military veterans that I have met. He's one of the best speakers. And when it comes to military podcasts, Para SF podcast, which is the Special Forces wing of the Indian Army. The Para SF podcasts are my absolute favorites. I'm not going to talk too much about this one. I'll let you dive straight in. I will say that TRS is a Spotify exclusive. Every episode's available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. You know that if it's a Para SF podcast, there's going to be talk about combat. There's going to be talk about mentality. There's going to be talk about wild animal encounters, insurgency, and there's also going to be some emotional talk. This one was an emotionally charged episode that I enjoyed recording very much, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Thank you. Abhay Sapru sir, another Special Forces themed episode. Honored to have you, but I also feel at the same time that this is going to be a slightly different Special Forces themed episode. How are you, sir?
Thank you very much. Very happy to be on your show.
Okay.
I hope it's interesting.
Yeah, I feel there's so many experiences you've had, which we're going to unpack over the course of this podcast and hopefully the next one as well. There's just something different about Special Forces officers. In my eyes as a civilian, or rather as a podcaster who's done a few Special Forces themed episodes, usually Special Forces officers are not necessarily looking for growth as the human chase. They're looking for exploration as the human chase. And I feel every human has that human chase, while most of the world looks for growth of some form, spiritual growth or intellectual growth or material growth. Special Forces veterans look for exploration of life. Is that a fair observation?
So, Ranveer, I can easily say that when people volunteered for the Special Forces, at that stage, I'm certain 100% wanted to treat it as a profession and not as a career. And there's a huge difference here. It was a profession of arms. It was not a career. When you use the word career, then you do a lot of things to further that so that you can go up the ladder. All of us were there because we wanted to be there. Not because we wanted to become generals or brigadiers, but because we wanted to do things that Special Forces was offering.
Which is
going out, doing unorthodox soldiering, a tough life, the camaraderie, training, the experiences. So if you went to a SF unit, you would find, and this goes for the men also, but officers certainly, it was a motley collection of adventurers, romantics, eccentrics, misfits, all sorts.
I've noticed this as well. The eccentric.
I'm sure. I'm
nature.
telling you outside. I mean, you should be on the Special Forces selection committee. You know them backwards now. No. And you can see there, each of them is a character.
Each of them is a character.
Each of them is a character.
Which is what excites me about Special Forces podcasts. Because usually we get molds of people. With you guys, each person is a mold.
Each guy is a character. And they appreciated it. They encouraged it. But certainly I'd say, if you want to use the word exploration. Yeah, they had diverse interests. They wanted to push the limits. They wanted to discover themselves. And they were certainly different.
Yeah.
Certainly different. I can't say because I have no data on it, but I'm sure if you saw some of the guys who left the army and got into CV Street, I'm certain 90% to 95% have done exceedingly well in CV Street.
What is that for listeners, just to give them context?
This is, left the army and went into the civilian life. It just shows the adaptability, which was one of the qualities required. Like the Chinese say, a good bamboo bends with the wind. Most of them have done well. I've got friends, a couple of them who started companies, sold them off. They're millionaires.
These are special forces?
SF guys, my batch. Large companies.
When did you serve, sir?
Oh, I'm an old soldier now. I was commissioned 88 actually.
You're one of the rare special forces veterans where I'm not intimidated at the start. Like,
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, what you spoke about everyone being unique, you're not like the other folks I've met. I love each of them in a different way, honestly. Like, already love you.
No, but Ranveer, the point is, this is the little joke I had with my ex-NDA friends in the unit. Bulk of the officers were ex-NDAs. I'm a direct entry. I'm a Delhi University man. And I joined for a specific purpose because I wanted to prove a point to my father, who's also ex-army. So the moment I joined in the academy, and there was this grind that they were putting you into, get you into that format of what a soldier needs to do, think, behave. In the back of my mind, I used to keep telling myself, I'm a civilian. Someday I'm going to be a civilian. I'm here for the adventure. I'm here for the romance. I'm here to prove a point to my father. Keep that Delhi University side alive. And I think the moment I left, that civilian side has sort of emerged. So perhaps I don't come across that much of a soldier. And of course, the SF also gave you a chance to keep long hair, keep a beard, unconventional soldiering.
Yeah.
And discipline was more internal than imposed from outside.
Unconventional soldiering for unconventional missions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
For someone who's probably tuning into a Special Forces podcast for the first time, would you like to shed some light on what unconventional missions even means?
Ranveer, it could be anything. So there was a whole set of conventional missions that you trained for. I.e., and I'm talking in those days, we had 3 units when I joined. There were 3 commando units. Now you call them special forces, and now there's a whole bunch of them. They converted the parachute battalions also.
I'll give you the civilian version of it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, Army, Navy, Air Force have their commando units, which are slightly higher efficiency soldiers and trained with supplemental training courses. That constitutes the basics of special forces. Para SF for Army, Marcos for Navy, Garuda for Air Force. And I believe now there are even more special forces regiments like the NSG. But I will let you go on from here.
Yeah, so the tasking, the conventional tasking is different. The conventional tasking could be anything which is behind enemy lines in a conventional war. It could be hitting a enemy headquarters. It could be blowing up a dam. It could be blowing up an aqueduct, train, raid, assassination, whatever. And this is in a conventional war. In an unconventional war, which is where we've been engaged most of the time, bulk of the experience the SF units have gained has been in Kashmir, Northeast. I had the opportunity, of course, of going to Sri Lanka. But the bulk of the experience now is in counterinsurgency in your own country. So there is a conventional role, and in the unconventional, within the ambit of what is happening within the country, SF units are thrown. And those missions are ambush, raid, some of those things.
Of Kashmir, the Northeast and Sri Lanka, which one, I don't even know how you can gauge this, but is it a fair question to you if I ask you which one was the most challenging?
Well, of course it is, sir. You can, Sri Lanka.
Really?
Oh, sir. And I can say it with complete confidence. If you ask this with any of those who served in Sri Lanka and had the experience of serving in the Northeast and in J&K, And I served in J&K for a very long time. It broke my back, 3.5 years. They will still tell you it's Sri Lanka. For the simple reason, you went to a country where you didn't know the terrain, you didn't have the weaponry, you were fighting against a bunch of people, guerrilla warfare, who could mix around with the civilians. It was a very difficult place. Your mindset, you were not tuned, you were not trained. And every infantry battalion that went in suffered casualties, very heavy casualties. My own unit, which is an SF unit, lost 3 officers killed, 5 captains wounded, 32 other ranks. When I joined, senior majors were going into operation. And everybody lost people. They shattered the myth of the martial races, the Gorkhas, the Sikhs, you name it. They would maul you. They were killers. See, the most dangerous fighter is the guy who's intelligent and motivated. And if he's trained and unleashed on a terrain of his own choosing, he's the most dangerous man. As the American Special Forces say, the right man in the right job is the most devastating weapon. And the Tamil tiger was exactly that.
When you use this word motivated in terms of combat, what does that do to a human's mind? If you say that, okay, my mind is motivated within combat, does that make you do riskier maneuvers, more dangerous moves? Like, what is it?
Ranveer, if you're not motivated, you are going to hold yourself back in combat. Simple. And in Sri Lanka, everybody was raising this issue at some stage or the other. What are we doing here?
What are the Indian...
Why are we here? And there was this big talk that the RAW is supporting them. I hit a camp, and this is a known fact. I hit a camp where there were receipts of their casualties being treated in some clinic in Rameshwaram. There were movie tickets. They had their safe houses in South India. The RAW was supporting them. Everybody knew this double game happening. And at the same stage, you were getting mauled. So there were what we call radio patrols happening. The things that you see in the Vietnam.
What is the
very bit of, you sent a patrol, the patrol go out 200 meters from the perimeter, sit in the bush, fake some radio messages, come back. Why take a chance? So, it pushed the army to do these things. Because it was such a dangerous place, you stepped out of the post. And you didn't know you would come back in one piece. And I personally, I have the concentration of a butterfly. I'm very poor concentration and focus. Sri Lanka is the only place where I still remember, when you stepped out of the post, till you reached the ambush site, all your senses were working. All your senses were working. You couldn't let your guard down. They would hit you.
So could you give some geopolitical / political background on the situation? I'm assuming that this is about 93, 94, roughly that time. What was happening with this whole Tamil tiger situation, and why were people even riled up in the first place? Because we have a lot of Gen Z listeners who were born after 2005.
No, they don't know a thing.
No. So
they don't know a thing. My second book was on Sri Lanka. From about early 80s, the Sinhala and the Tamils had been at loggerheads. The Tamil was always treated as a second-class citizen. Now, in a nutshell, there are Tamils who went in the last 100 years, who were taken by the Brits for rubber plantations. There were Tamils who had been there from the Chola times. They were the old Tamils. Nevertheless, they were treated as second-class citizens, and there had been resistance from time to time. And at some stage, a whole bunch of these Tamil parties came up: EPR, LF, LTT, Plot, etc., etc. Prabhakaran was the head of LTT, and he was the most aggressive, pugnacious by nature. And at that stage, a whole bunch of these people, under pressure of the genocide, sort of genocide being committed by the Sri Lankan forces, were coming into Tamil Nadu. And there was a fear in Tamil Nadu that there could be a voice to carve out a separate Elam, including parts of Tamil Nadu. and stuff like that. So, and Tamil Nadu is a big state, and therefore it was decided at some stage that the Indians have to intervene. And instead of directly intervening, they decided to train the Tamils, arm the Tamils. And a whole bunch of them turned up for training in camps spread across Tamil Nadu. And one of them was at a place called Chakrata. This is up in the hills next to Dehradun.
Really, that far up?
Yes, and this is the interesting part, and I say this in my book also. The interesting part is my father was posted there. And that was his last posting.
In Chakrata?
In Chakrata. If I can
Sure.
digress a little more. Now, Chakrata has a base. It's called Establishment 22. It was set up in after the 62 war, funded by the CIA to train Tibetan guerrillas. These are people who had migrated, crossed the border and come into India. Mostly Khams from eastern Tibet. So they
What
were
is
to be
that?
trained.
Like a tribe?
It's a Kham. It's
Okay.
Khampas, so the eastern Tibet area, fighters basically. So it was decided that the Americans would fund, the Indian army would train them, and they would be sent back for sabotage, spying, etc., back into Tibet. So it was a very hush-hush. It still is a very secretive place. They haven't developed Chakrata. It's at 7,000 feet. It's a nice hill station, but it's still a single road. And it's not by design. It's not by default. It's by design that the government doesn't allow anything to come up. And from time to time, that school, which was training Tibetans, was used for training all sorts of unsavory characters in the subcontinent. Sindhis, Baluchis, whoever needed to be trained could be sent there. One corner tucked up in the hills. And then at some stage, they started sending the Tamils. And the senior leadership of the LTT were trained there.
But who were the trainers?
Indian Army officers.
So this is an official...
Yeah.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is, I was about to join the army and I'd come back from college. And my father was posted there. And I recall every weekend, because we were settling down in Dehradun. It's a 2-hour run. So every week the school, Tutu establishment, the institute, would send the bus down to buy provisions at Dehradun, which was the nearest town. So my father would come across every weekend to stay the weekend. And I remember sitting there and this bus drives up, curtains pulled, the driver wearing civilian clothes, but you can see the mark of a soldier on him. And my father steps out and behind him there's a South Indian guy carrying his suitcase. And this happened a couple of weekends. And I asked him, I said, who's this South Indian? He touched my father's feet. And I said, what is this? He said, oh, some canteen contractor, just grateful. And then he retired, he settled down, and, I got into the army at some stage. And then the India Today came out with some articles about the LTT and the problem in Sri Lanka, and they're being trained in Chakrata, and there was a picture of Prabhakaran standing there with his cronies, the background of the hills. And my brother was also there. My brother looked at it and said, yeah, I've seen this guy. He's pointing at Prabhakaran. So I said, are you sure? Because they're writing about this guy now. He said, I'm certain. Now, my brother claims that Prabhakaran came there to the house. I don't know. But I certainly saw a whole bunch of these. And, in 88, 87, you didn't see too many South Indians in Dehradun up north. And you could see distinctly that they were different. So now look at this. The father trains them without realizing that the son will be facing his former students at some stage. And when I came back from Sri Lanka, I remember he was a very seasoned soldier. I came back from Sri Lanka and I remember the first evening, he didn't ask me anything. In the evening, we sat down over a drink. And then he looked at me and he says, so, what do you think of the boys? I said, which boys? He said, my boys. I said, well, they were good. We lost a lot of men and officers. And I think I saw a little smile and a twinkle in the old colonel's eyes as he looked up. And then he raised a salute to the Tamil Tigers of Sri Lanka. He said, serves you bastards right. Bullying with the boys, aren't you? He was very impressed with them. He says, some of them didn't even know how to tie a shoelace. And when we worked out an 8-hour program, training program, they said, no, the senior leader came up and said, no, make it 13, make it 14. That's the kind of motivation they had. And then you unleash them, train them, arm them, and unleash them on their own terrain. They were deadly.
Now I understand what you meant by motivated.
So that's one part. No? The other part is that, after they went back, And they took on the Sri Lankan army. And then at some stage, Jayawardene and Rajiv Gandhi signed this accord. It was supposed to be between three people, Prabhakaran, Jayawardene and Mr. Gandhi. Prabhakaran was holed up in Ashoka Hotel, I think, sort of a house arrest, guest. He was not consulted. They went and signed up. And he was told, fait accompli, here is the accord. He said, I have not even consulted, and I'm talking about an Elam, an independent state. I'm not interested in all this nonsense. I said, we don't care. We're sending the Indian peacekeeping force to ensure, because President Jayawardene said, look, we can't enforce disarming. We don't have the manpower. So we got embroiled. A whole bunch of us turned up there thinking it's going to be a peacekeeping mission. The Sri Lankan army was sent back into their barracks. We took over their post.
Which year was this?
It is 87. I joined later, of course, but the unit had been committed for some time. All three commando units were there. And till then, the LTT used to come sit in the mess and stuff like that, chat around. They'd been trained. Some of the instructors had trained them from the SF. All one army there.
What do you mean they came and sat in the mess?
Because we weren't taking them on. You see, for some time, the Indian Army, Maratha Battalion and a SF unit sitting at Palali Airfield. We're just sitting and watching what is happening while the accord was being signed. What sparked it off was that they captured 17 of these senior leaders, LTT leaders, the Coast Guard. And at that stage, the accord had been signed. So Jayawardene said, hand them over to us, the Sri Lankan army. The LTT said, don't do it. They'll be tortured, they'll be killed. But because the accord had been signed, it was decided to hand them over to the Sri Lankan army. At that stage, they asked that a last meal be given to the boys, and they passed cyanide capsules inside. And all 17 of them committed suicide, chewed on their cyanide capsules.
To prevent themselves from
from being taken over by the Sri Lankan army. And that was the spark. After that, the next, I think it was a 10 para, without taking any names here, it was one of their Russian trucks which was going to Jaffna. Got the boys out, burned them, put tires around their neck. And then it was free for all. The enemy was Sri Lanka and the LTT then.
They attacked Indian Special Forces.
And the infantry unit there. And then the force started building in. Because by then it was all right, if you're not going to listen to us and disarm, and your intent is clear, you're hostile, then we're going in. So then they started building in troop movement. And then they realized they needed more troops and more troops. And once we'd taken over the urban centers, the LTT promptly disappeared into the jungle. Then it became jungle fighting. So most of my experience in Sri Lanka is just sitting in bloody ambush.
You mean in a jungle?
In a jungle. It was terrible. 72 hours, 96 hours, no bloody water. You're just sitting there. Some track coming in, going out in a very thick jungle. And you would go in at night, sit there, and just sit there.
So you guys would just wait for 72 hours continuously in the jungle and observe if there's any kind of movement or any kind of disturbance?
It was an ambush. Okay. It was an ambush operation.
For someone who doesn't understand that word, how do you explain
Well,
it?
you conceal yourself on some intelligence or at random because you feel there's movement, hostile movement, on a track.
On a track?
Track.
You mean like a road in the jungle?
Well, yes. And then you hope that the guy comes along so you can hit him.
And there's the danger of wild animals.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I ran to a few.
Really?
Yeah. I remember there was a Jat battalion and an elephant picked up the last guy and carried him in the bloody jungle.
And killed him?
No, threw him down. He was a little shaken, but he survived. I laid an ambush, I remember, and I think it was a 72-hour ambush. And the LMG guy suddenly nudged me. I was right next to him. We were covering a track. He nudged me and then did this. And in that starlight, through the foliage, I couldn't make out what he's showing. And then I saw some movement. I'd see that. I could see the foresight of the LMG. And I'd see something rise and fall and rise and fall. And then it was a wild boar. The guy was, I don't know, maybe he was bloody drunk on some fruit or something. He just walked up, sat himself, leaned against the LMG barrel, went off to sleep. And here the 20 hard SF men, shitting bricks. If this guy wakes up, and he's a Tusker, he wakes up and he charges, that's the end of your ambush, and that's the end. What do you do with a Tusker sitting there? And then he got up, shook himself, disappeared. And I felt very happy. I said, if this guy doesn't know we're sitting here, that means, because it takes time for the jungle smell to start coming.
What is that?
So you go, people often land up in ambushes. You can't go wearing aftershave, hair oil, talcum powder, and nonsense of that kind. So it takes some time before, generally 24 to 36 hours, before you start smelling like the jungle, which is essential. Because, people who you are after, the opposition is only living wild. Their sense of smell is very keen. The guy who's coming down that track, he can smell anything. So you got to be very careful that you are not using any artificial smell.
Which is why you said that Sri Lanka was the most challenging, because even those guys were as
aggressive.
They
were very aggressive. Their training films were some of these Hollywood movies.
Really?
They were aggressive. I mean, some of their operations were sheer madness.
What kind of weapons did they use?
They had AKs. They had better weapons than the Indian Army.
How?
Well, most of them were supplied by us. Then they got into their own procurement.
How?
Well, they had money.
How?
The entire Sri Lankan diaspora across the world was giving them money. The funding was being collected. So I came back on leave. This is a strange thing.
Is that the narrative, or could it have been geopolitical powers at play funding it?
No. This funding was happening. Their own people were funding them. People settled in Sweden, Norway, England. Forget that. I came on leave, and I remember at the Madras, now Chennai railway station, I had a bunch of these college guys asking me for donations. So I said, for what? He said, for the LTT. And my first desire was to punch him in the face. And I said, I survived Sri Lanka, I get lynched by the locals in my own country. So they were collecting. They had enough money. They had their own ships, which were getting all the arms, equipment.
Was there a weapon that the LTT had, or that you had ever faced in a combat situation, which you were kind of wary of in terms of was either a dangerous weapon to take on or just...
No, the IEDs were terrible.
What?
The improvised explosive devices, the IEDs, they were deadly. Bulk of our casualties were because of their very innovative and imaginative way of using their explosives.
Could you give an example?
Oh, I can give an example. There used to be a road opening party which used to go, for example. And after clearing the road, they would sit under one tree and have a cup of tea. So they laid IEDs in a series like this. I think they got about 12 or 15 people in that. I lost a friend because they had posters stuck on the walls, LTT posters. They knew, sure enough, the Indian Army is going to come, start taking them off. One of them had a little explosive behind it. Blew him up.
Why is
there used to be a Johnny Mine, I remember, to take your leg off. It was a plastic thing. You couldn't even detect it. Made in a soap box.
Wow. Why is it called improvised explosive device?
Because you improvise it.
Just through scrap material to put it together? Yeah. What causes the explosion? Like some mixture of chemicals?
Chemicals, yeah. Potassium, nitrate, or whatever. It's simple. And then you stuff it up with nails, with bolts, whatever you have. Takes your leg off. That's good enough.
Have you been injured in combat?
No, I haven't been, luckily.
Have you come close to getting injured?
Yeah, nobody wants to get shot. Nobody goes into combat thinking he's going to get shot. But, I've had people getting shot close to me, yes.
And as an SF teammate, if I can call you that, is your protocol to go and be the medic in that situation as well?
If there is no medic, yes.
And
certainly.
What I understand is in the SF uniform, you'll have a bunch of pockets, and different pockets have different tools, of which one pocket is just your...
Yeah, you carry your field dressing.
Okay. So that also includes a morphine injection? Or...
Well, not in my time. I don't know if they still have a morphine injection, but the morphine injection would ideally be carried by the nursing assistant.
Okay.
But SF units, they lay a lot of emphasis on medical training. So a troop going out would ideally have a trained medic, and then the rest of the guys would have rudimentary idea of how a gunshot wound has to be addressed.
Have you addressed a gunshot wound?
I have addressed a gunshot wound, yes.
What's your mindset seeing a brother like in pain plus having to go about your
Why, I ran into an ambush in J&K at about 7,000 feet up in a forest, and it was a nasty situation because there were 2 civilians killed, 1 civilian seriously wounded. They were cutting wood at 5 a.m, and it was not a disturbed area. It still is not a disturbed area and never was. Entire Pir Panjal, Badarwa in this area. And I had my lead scout, who was a paratrooper, young boy. He had a bullet through his, it hit his AK, which had a butt, ricocheted and went through his forearm here, and another round went through his stomach. And then we had to carry him down from 8,000 feet to the road head on your back after it had rained, and he was in pain. He was sleeping off, and we were trying to keep him awake, and we had nothing actually. We had nothing. We used to carry sanitary napkins for gunshot wound issues. This is, I'm talking the old soldiering. This is the time when they were raising RR units. There was a shortage of equipment, and they were pooling in resources, cannibalizing the other infantry units. We didn't have any medical thing. Somebody had a painkiller, I think we gave it to him. We got him down, we got a chopper, we got him out, but he died 20 days later in the hospital. Negligence. I'm certain about it because I met him in the hospital, he was fine. And then suddenly I get a message to say he's dead.
Negligence from medical staff?
I'm sure. His stitches opened up, he bled to death.
What goes on in your head? How do you keep your control as a soldier when you're seeing like a teammate be that hit? Is there a certain amount of emotional training that kicks in?
Certainly. It depends on, every situation on is going to be different. You get a chap who's hit, there's still a life contact on. Can you reach him? In my case, it was sheer bad luck. I mean, these guys came up from the other side of the hill, spotted us, opened up, and then they disappeared. So I had all the time to address my casualty, but every combat situation is different. As I said, sometimes you may not get the chance to address it, but it certainly takes a lot of your attention away from the fight to addressing this guy who's been wounded. That is why they've started playing around with the caliber of the weapon. They used to use a 7.62, which is powerful.
What does that mean?
It means you rather wound a chap. In a conventional war, you rather wound a chap because if you wound him and you have a chap in the battlefield screaming, shouting, A, he's demoralizing the rest of the people. B, you need another 4 guys to pull him, take him back right till the base. Why would you kill a man? Because it's simple then. It's done and dusted and over.
It's psychological warfare.
Yeah, psychological plus the issue of making sure that the guy has to be pulled back, carried, medically treated, etc., etc. So then you have a 5.56, which will probably injure you, which is a smaller caliber round.
A shorter bullet.
Shorter bullet, lesser powder in it, so to say. So it's worse to have a situation where you have a couple of people wounded and screaming and shouting or whatever is happening. Dead is dead. Party's over.
So the one thing I've realized, and it's really sad, but the one thing I've realized about urban centers is that urban youth don't have too much of a perspective on the Indian Special Forces, but they have perspective on Navy SEALs, on American Marines, etc. And when you start telling them about Indian Special Forces, they're blown away. But to explain it to them, I have to talk to them in their language. So I have a lot of bros for whom, when I was trying to explain what para-SF is for the first time, I said that, you've played those video games where you have to single-handedly go and take out an entire camp of enemies. Special Forces does that, but in real life. Is that a fair explanation?
No, it is. I mean, this is the power of Hollywood. This is the power of the American culture. This is what the Arab world fears about the American culture. First comes your television with all the Hollywood movies. Then comes McDonald's, and that is how they start changing your culture. And so the fact is that my own son is impressed with all these SEALs team movies and big brawny guys. I don't think so he has any idea about what the Indian Special Forces is about. It's all about the American good, smart uniforms, big guys.
And
A chopper flying all over the place. It's a different ball game. Yeah.
I mean, after all these special forces conversations, I can't imagine growing up with a special forces veteran in my house.
No, he's a cool guy. He's a cool guy. Whenever I pitch into him, he says, it's a great saying. He says, "Father, don't forget, youth today is wasted on the young." Very nice saying. When I tell him, you don't do this, your bloody generation not doing anything, it's constantly mobile, push your limits, etc. Youth today is wasted on the young. I accept it. Thank you very much. He's not taking the challenge. He very comfortably accepts the fact that we are a soft bunch of people. Yeah. So thank you very much. I say, yeah, fine. All right.
I hear you, and I also agree that we are all softies to a very large degree. And probably this podcast is a means to still experience a version, like a very visual version of what you have experienced through conversations. And that's what it's been for me as an artist. I get to live some perspective from other people's lives. And I'm not even saying I've lived like 1% of the kind of intensity you have lived, but at least I get a trailer. And I'm hoping that that's what the listeners get as well. In saying that, let's make the podcast a little lighter as well, because there are lighter aspects to serving in the Special Forces, sir. As far as I understand, Special Forces are trained in land, air and water in terms of jumps from aircrafts, long distance, I don't want to call it trekking. What is the official word you would use?
Reconnaissance or penetration, deep
penetration in land. And then diving as well. Had you done a lot of dives as well throughout your tenure?
So you had a primary skill and a secondary skill, each of us.
Okay.
So my primary skill is combat diver.
Really? Okay.
And everybody had to be a paratrooper. So you had to do that.
By paratrooper, you mean jumps?
Normal jumps, static line jumps, as they say.
Okay.
Round canopy jumps. Everybody has to do that. Then there's a specialization, which is called now skydiving outside. We call it combat free fall.
Okay.
So that could be one skill. Mountaineering could be another skill. Then you had sniper skills, demolition, etc., etc. But your primary skill, one of the primary skills that I had was combat diving.
Because it came to you naturally as compared to other people?
Well, I volunteered for free fall. They had no vacancy then.
Okay.
So they said there's a vacancy for combat diving. And it's a very tough course. The Navy runs it for us. It's a very tough course and they play merry hell with you. So I said, all right. So I went for that. So I became a diver.
When we say combat diving, it's operations like detonating underwater explosives or placing an explosive on.
Ranveer, simple would be for any operations happening on the coastline. The Marine Commandos would probably go in. For any waterborne operation inland, the Indian Special Forces, these Special Force units would be deployed. But by and large, what they train you to do is to use it as a mode of infiltration. If you have to move from point A to point B, there are a couple of ways that you can do it. A, you can walk it. B, you can jump at 24,000, 25,000, 20,000, 18,000, depending on wind conditions, etc. at night with weight, and then glide in. So this is called combat free fall. Or if there's a water body, then you get inside and you start swimming. It's horsework. You have a compass direction and you swim. So the whole objective is that you are using it as a mode of infiltration to move from point A to point B.
Quietly.
Son, has to be quietly. That's why it's a closed circuit set. Have you dived?
Yes, sir.
So you blow out those bubbles. That's an open set. Military diving is different. It's a pure oxygen set and it's a closed circuit set. So there are no bubbles going up. And you can't go below 7 meters because pure oxygen gets poisonous. So you just dip under the surface, get your compass direction, and start swimming.
I want to talk a lot more about your military career, but just for now, I'm going to ask you something about your career post the military. You're working at a bank at this
No,
stage?
I'm not working anymore. I'm a gentleman at large.
Okay.
I wish I could say that I have estates to live off, but I don't. But I have retired.
After having done these things in life, in terms of being in those kind of combat situations, being a medic in certain situations, pulling bodies out of rivers, you're sitting in a bank, and I'm sure you're applying your special forces skill set there also and growing. Do you go back to all these memories?
Yeah, of course. From time to time, they fade. You grow old, but soul-killing job. There's nothing sitting in a... You packed in more excitement in a day than you perhaps pack in 20 years of work outside. There was no excitement. There was nothing. It's just a job.
What do you make of civilian reality? When you're sitting with all your co-workers at the bank and someone's crying about their kid up at school or whatever, and you're just like, oh, that's what you're crying about. Cool.
No. So, Ranveer, the problem was that of all the teachings and learnings that you got from these special forces, one of them was that you don't panic very easily now. After the situations that you've seen, you don't panic. And I had to pinch myself on occasions when there is some serious stuff has happened by civilian standards. And everybody is gathered there and everybody's flapping like headless chicken. And you're thinking, yeah, what the man? Where's the problem? And I remember the HR head once turned to me and, looked at me, and I could see that this guy he said, yeah, you're not taking it seriously, I think, Abhay. And I thought for a second, I said, how do I explain to him that he's sitting in an AC room? There are no bullets flying. Nobody's dead here. I said, I'll sort it out. No, you're not taking it seriously. I said, do I have to... What do you want me to do? Because I don't see there's a problem. So sometimes I realize it used to become a bit of a problem because, and this goes in your personal life also, that what people perceive as a huge issue is no issue for you. And then you come across as being insensitive, callous, not concerned. And there's no way you can explain.
But maybe your spectrum of sensitivity is so wide that...
No, it's all... You see, if you're going to compare anything, which is unfair, and I keep telling myself, look, forget that, it's gone. That life is over. It was a life. Different time, different context. So don't keep carrying that at the back of your head, because you'll never have a situation outside in CV Street like that where somebody's dying, screaming, somebody's being shot, somebody's... Never going to happen. And if that is your yardstick to say that is a crisis and nothing else matters, then you're going to have a problem in CV Street. You'll have problems in your relationship.
Are you comfortable talking about that?
I'm comfortable about everything. But all I'm saying is, yes, I've had problems. I often have problems, even now with my wife, and you're not serious. Where's the problem?
Have you seen this movie called American Sniper?
I've seen it, yes.
They kind of depicted exactly what you're saying in terms of, as a soldier, you have a certain mindset. But when you go back into the real world, sometimes it's difficult to completely empathize with the real world because you realize how narrow it is.
Yeah, Ranveer, I disagree. See, the point is, to each their own. Your perception is built by what you see, what your experiences are, the environment that you live in. I saw other things. I volunteered for it. And nobody forced me. It's unfair for me to say that, you're not a real man because you haven't seen things, that your perception is narrow, that your concerns are narrow. No, that's your concern. That's the way you look at it. That's the way you grew up. That's what you've seen. Fair deal. So I'm just saying this is the problem I faced.
Sure.
Otherwise, nothing compared after leaving the SF and joining, the various banks that I worked in. It's been a piece of cake. It's been a piece of cake here. Nothing ever compared to what I went through in the SF. I've had a great time. I've retired. I'm out. I'm climbing hills, diving, swimming, doing piece of cake.
in your relationship, was it like a similar problem where you were reacting differently to your partner, and then that was becoming the crux of the misunderstanding?
It can, yes. It
Okay.
still does.
And how
Still
do you
does.
go past that as a guy?
It still does. I'm often lectured that you have no sensitivity.
So it's the age-old, sorry, baby, you're
No,
right.
you see, it is. Everybody's facing the same shit. You see, the point is you don't have to serve in the SF to face that.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I think I would agree when I'm told often that there is a lack of sensitivity. And what can I say? What can I explain to them? How do I explain that, your seriousness, your situation, which seems to you like a crisis, is no crisis?
Yeah. Telling you something which has offended a military veteran in the past, and I'm still going to tell you this, but maybe I've had like 10 to 15 military veterans on the show, and I can think of like 2 or 3 who weren't carrying aspects of pain in their eyes at this stage of life as a veteran. I'd also probably put you in that same bracket, but you're one of the older guys I've spoken to. Maybe time has healed you. That's what I sense as well. Was there an angle of some, I don't want to call it PTSD because it's an
No, but
overused.
I suffered PTSD. You should call it PTSD.
Okay.
I had problems.
For people who don't know what PTSD is,
Post-traumatic stress. Yes, I had problems for many years.
what happened?
You would withdraw into yourself in a gathering. You would get anger, seeing people enjoying themselves. There was a lot of anger. In my case, there was a lot of anger.
But why anger out of someone enjoying themselves?
Well, why is the bastard enjoying himself? Doesn't he know there are people dying up there? Does he even have the faintest clue that somebody's, And my problem was, there used to be occasions when I used to come back. There was an occasion when I remember I came back, there was a contact in the valley. I was going on leave. The next day I was just flying. They had an operation in the evening. The firefight, there was a lot of... Next day you took a flight from Srinagar, came down, and then I saw some party, and I went for this party. And the sudden change, just 13 hours back, you were sitting in a bush and there was fighting happening. And now there is people enjoying themselves. It takes time, There is problem.
Is it just time that heals?
Yeah, it takes time.
Did you ever...
There was no counseling in my time. There was nobody even talked about PTSD. Yeah. If you said I'm cracking under the strain, then you were yellow. That was the old Indian Army. I don't know even now. You say it's too much. Too much. I've had enough. Your reputation is going to get tarnished.
Yeah. Sometimes for some people, therapy may not even be the answer. But at least in my experience of talking to a lot of men from different walks of life, there are some things you can only tell your partner or your girlfriend, and then there's something you can only tell your brothers. So you need bros to kind of look out for each other if therapy is not possible. And for some people, it's not because of financial constraints or whatever.
And I don't know how many counselors there would be who could understand PTSD. Maybe you need a military counselor.
Yeah.
You can't talk this with your girlfriend. She's not going to understand. Or your wife. She's not
Did you ever try?
No, I didn't try. But I ran into problems in my marriage.
Which one outcome of the PTSD?
I'm sure.
Did you ever feel like crying at any point?
No, I don't think so. No crying.
Okay.
But adjustment, basically anger issues. Not that you'd go and do anything, but you just get this strong feeling that I want to punch this guy in the face. This guy sitting there. I feel like punch. I wish he takes a fight with me.
Why?
Stuff like
Why
that.
him?
No, it's just that something you've taken a dislike. Maybe he's just enjoying himself so much. Anything could just trigger something in your mind, and you a lot of withdrawal. So people have different symptoms. Some don't carry any scars at all. Those are the champs. You can go through without anything. But I took time. I took about 3-4 years, 4 years, 5 years.
You're one of the guys from whom I sense a lot of healed energy. And I'm coming from the perspective of doing podcasts with everyone. Lots of military folks, but generally there's a lot of people who carry trauma with them. I feel you've grown out of
Completely.
the trauma. I can actually sense it from you. If I may be rude enough, I do feel there's like maybe 10% left to go, like in you, but that's just my reading.
And I keep it alive. When I look back on my military days, it seems a different world. It's been so many years now. It's a different life, a different world. I look at some pictures and I see, and when I wrote my 3 books, I made the effort to go back, including Sri Lanka. I went back to some of those places. And it was catharsis of sort, And then I wrote. So I think that process of going to those same places, putting it in a book, I think a lot of it is just out of the system.
Yeah. Journaling.
I look at that book now and I did this. Oh, really?
There's a huge
Different
life
life.
lesson in you. What you just said, writing it out.
Yeah. That's the best thing they say.
The only thing that helped me deal with the worst breakup of my life was poetry.
There you are.
Yeah.
There
Because
you
I was
are.
looking for a new form of content to create. Someone said that, where are all the poets gone? And I said, oh, that's what you want? I can do poetry. And then I started writing my pain out and it felt nicer. It felt like taking an emotional shit.
But the point is, did it continue after that, the poetry? Or it stopped?
It stopped once the pain was gone.
There you are.
Best ways to deal with pain. I used to look down upon poetry thinking that why does anyone even do this? Until it started coming out of me. And I realized, there's writing in terms of writing stories, writing articles, where you have to kind of write in a construct. And then there's poetry, which is free flow writing.
Absolutely.
And free flow comes from your heart. Just write whatever you're feeling. It doesn't even have to rhyme. Write 4-5 sentences about what you're feeling.
No, try your hand at painting or sketching. I did that too.
What did you sketch?
I sketched human figures and stuff. I painted watercolors. I have a few pictures up on my wall. A couple of my mates have them on the wall.
Do any of those pictures have pain?
No, none.
Okay.
None.
Okay.
None. More scenery. But it was a great way to de-stress, to take things out. I'm just suggesting to you.
Oh, okay. I have a terrible handwriting and I can't draw to save my life. Like I can draw some crazy shit, but it won't look good.
Who cares?
Coming back to the themes of the show. So with Special Forces podcast, I often struggle to come up with new questions because we've had so many that I don't know what else to ask. But you've given me 3 or 4 new tangents to think about now. I have to go back to some of my old questions, which are points of interest for me. Animals. We spoke about the wild boar you saw in Sri Lanka, but you've also served in Northeast and Kashmir. Did you have animal encounters there?
Not in the Northeast.
Okay.
We were hitting a Naga camp in Burma. People talk about this trans-border operation and stuff like that, which happened in the Northeast. The Indian Army has been crossing over, especially the SF units have been crossing over for some years. And the Burmese government and the Indian government, of course, know about it. It was with permission from the Burmese government that we would cross over. So this is one of those operations. We'd crossed over. It was a very large Naga camp. And this must have been about 5 or 6 kilometers inside Burma. And at night, we started hearing this. It's a monkey called the gibbon.
The
Have you
what?
heard? Gibbon.
Okay.
And it had a laugh, it's like a human laugh. And we suddenly heard this loud coming in this very thick forest in the Northeast, and nobody knew. See, is it the militants coming back? Is there some sort of a signaling happening? Much later we came back, we realized it's an animal of sorts. Much later when I checked up, I realized it's called a gibbon. I think it's called a gibbon. And it's a protected species. In J&K, of course, I cited leopards. In fact, I had a very nice conversation with a militant, a chap called Sher Khan, over this incident that happened in North Kashmir. Very interesting. And the first time I realized that these guys also have a sense of humor, because I used to talk to a lot of them on the radio set, just trying to get into their head to figure out, are they romantics, adventurers, like, some of the SF guys are.
It's a classified podcast.
I had a 2-3 years and chatted quite a few of them. I had to ensure that I chat only the Paki militants, the foreign militants. Bulk of them were there for economic reasons, but a lot of them, the leaders, of course, had gone to some madrasa or the other. So, there are other experiences. Coming to this one, there's thick snow, a place called Lolab Valley. And at about 2 o'clock, we were in tents. 2 o'clock, there's firing, a burst of fire. Shit, somebody's attacked the post, some nonsense. 3 feet of snow, miserably cold. So I got out, walked up to the sentry post. And it was a dug-in place with sandbags around it. It was a light machine gun post. There were 2 guys there looking very shaken up. So I said, who fired? I said, any sighting? Did you see anything? We're camped in a forest. So attack. So sher aa gaya. Now sher is a common word for tiger, lion, anything, but this was particularly a leopard. It's a big cat. Not a big cat. So I, showed my torch, hard snow. So there were pug marks. And I noticed there were 2 of them. So they were hunting in pair. So I said, what happened? He says, so we saw this ice sparkling in the darkness, and before we could react, this guy leapt. And he must have miscalculated because he landed on top of the sandbag and knocked the LMG barrel off. The number 2 guy behind him opened up with the AK. That's when both of them ran off. Next morning, the sun came out. In bad weather, the sun came out and the radios crackled to life and militant stations coming alive. And there's this militant station. I recognized his voice. He recognized my voice. Came on set and said, he's berating some Kashmiri militant. And he's telling that chap, Kashmiri commander, he's telling him, he says, Bilal ko bheja tha ration ke liye. What's happened? He's gone last 2 days. We haven't had food to eat. If this is the way you conduct jihad, we are your bloody guests. We've come here to fight. 3 days, 2 days, he hasn't come back with any bloody food. And added to that, there is another problem. There is a bloody leopard who's come and attacked. And now Javed is mauled. Now they're sitting in a hideout somewhere in the forest there. Miserable conditions. And now Javed is mauled. Now tell that bastard to come up as soon as possible and get a bloody Hakim also while you're doing that. And if Javed dies, he's pitching into this bloody Kashmiri guy who's constantly saying, sorry, my fault and stuff like that. So I heard this. So I said, Salaam alaikum, Sher Khan. No, Fauji bhai, leave the channel, please. I've got problems happening here.
Really?
So you could talk like that. I got my own set of problems here. I said, I know your problem, Sher Khan. You've been attacked by a leopard. He says, oh, forget that. And I said, no. Listen to me. That leopard, because you fuckers don't come down and fight. You bastards are sitting up there or hanging around in the villages, eating free food. We've trained these leopards. They're trained by us. Now these leopards are going to come hunting for you.
Aren't leopards like extremely shy and try avoiding human leopards?
They don't. They'll attack kids, dogs. They're very shy. But if you're desperate, There's no food. This is thick snow. Yeah, this is -10, -15 degrees. No food. I recall that incident with Sher Khan, that conversation.
I'm inclined to know more about these classified podcasts you've done with militants.
No, I had nice conversations with them. I realized that, they were my impression of them was that they were a narrow-minded, limited people. They're as T.E. Lawrence said in his book, their intellects lay fallow in incurious resignation. The imagination was not vivid. Their thought process was very mathematical. Those who had studied in a madrasa had been taught history related to Muslim glory. They could tell you about Muhammad Ghori, Mahmud Ghazni. But if you question them about Ranjit Singh,
World War II,
or the British, in Northwest Frontier, or Hari Singh Nalwa, they hadn't heard about all that. They were convinced in their superiority as fighting people. They had a bit of a disdain for the Hindu, called you a Baniya. And the background is that, most of their villages right up till Kabul, right up till Central Asia, and the Hindu generally was the Baniya. So he was not the fighting man. So their impression was that you're not a good fighter. Very cocky about his own fighting ability. But
were they good fighters?
They were good fighters.
Because of
They
what?
were good fighters.
Because of training?
No, because of motivation.
Aggression.
Because of their commitment to what they believed in.
Have
They were good fighters. And in my time, the Flotsam, which had been kicked out of Afghanistan after the Soviets left, that bunch which was footloose was then diverted into Kashmir. So the bunch which came in were very seasoned fighters. If you got into a firefight with them, you could see that this guy is not a novice. You see, if as an experienced combat man, one can tell from
maneuvers,
from the way you maneuver, the way you fire, what sort of an opposition you're up against.
From the way you fire.
Mm-hmm. Right. You can see the guy's nervous. How accurate is his fire? How does he engage you? Experienced soldiers will tell you very easily that, I'm up against a novice. This bunch is not going to stand and fight. So all this comes with experience. I mean, the point is, this bunch used to fight you exactly the way you were fighting. He would fire single rounds. We would fire double tap. The SF generally doesn't believe in automatic fire. They believe in accurate fire. When you switch the lever and you go empty the magazine, and it's all over the place, and you put another magazine, and nobody does that. It's discouraged.
Okay.
Ideally, it's discouraged.
It's more pinpoint accuracy firing.
Precision is more important. Ammunition is important. You got to save it. What you see is what you fire at, unless such as suppressing fire, whatever. So this bunch, you could see their fire was accurate. They would control their ammunition, and they would fight till the end. There was no surrender of any kind. There were no Fidaeens in those days. Fidaeen bunch came in later.
Who are not good fighters?
Oh, good fighters, yeah. That's a one-way mission.
Okay. Like they're coming to you to die themselves.
Yes, it's a one-way mission. He's not going back.
Are there ever any hand-to-hand combat scenarios?
Not in my case, but I know people who've had that experience.
They lived to tell the tale.
They lived, yeah.
How do you take?
I know a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine, who chased a militant, who turned around and leveled his AK and fired, and it was a misfire. 1 in a million chance. And then they wrestled on the road in the darkness.
How big was your friend?
He's about shorter than me, but he's all right.
And versus the militant who was?
I don't know, but I just recall that he's a Paki guy. I think Paki guy or whatever. He's carrying a small that book, and then he says, are you going to give me any information? He said, so you might as well shoot me, sir. Finish me. There was no interrogation, nothing at all. He was shot immediately, but he was very lucky, very lucky. Luck is very important. Luck is important in everything in life, but it manifests itself more strongly in the profession of arms.
Yeah.
Bad luck could be as bad as getting shot or maimed or injured. And I remember in my time there were 4 officers who were known for their luck. I mean, they were fine officers, all 4 SF. One left the army, sold his company, retired at 48, a very wealthy man. The other is still serving as a major general, and 2 are dead. Walia is one of them, and another classmate of mine. Both are dead. But the talk was generally, if these chaps are going out, contact is imminent. Cock your weapons. So-and-so is leading something, some shit is going to hit fan for sure. So luck is very important. You can keep making the effort, but if you're not lucky, you're not getting the game.
What is it about being out there in the field, up there on a mountain, away from civilization, that the average civilian will never understand? I'm asking you a question about food. I'm asking you questions about hunting. I'm asking you questions about what it feels like being really out there in nature. What does it do to the mind? Like, probably, right from your first experience to some really memorable experience, because I've had special forces soldiers come on and say they've seen some of the most beautiful places in the world out there. I've had some people come and say they've eaten things that they would never eat ever. And I've had people come and say that they've seen things which they didn't expect to see.
No. So, Ranveer, if you're talking about the scenery, of course, you go and see places which I don't think so even the locals go and see. You end up seeing things. I mean, I remember this trans-border operation into Burma. There were teak trees which were practically,
the size
maybe
of
20 meters and 20 feet in diameter. Huge Burma teak trees. They must have been easily 500, 700, 600 years old. I've seen Deodar forest, extremely, extremely huge trees. And there were views, of course. There were sunsets and there were sunrises which were beautiful. It depends what your state of mind is. Are you getting that chance to appreciate? You can always get that chance. It's not that there's a firefight happening all the time. And especially when you're going into your target area, where you're laying in ambush, stuff like that. But it's hard. It's a hard life. When you're out, we don't light a fire. There is no tea. It's food that you carry that you have for the next 3 days, 4 days. It's raining. It's cold. And it's not comfortable. But there is a certain amount of training. There is a certain amount of culture that this is the way you operate. The difference is you have a traveler, for example, and a hunter. A traveler goes along in a jungle on a path. He comes across a wild animal. He shoots it. Carries on. A hunter will go inside to hunt. There's a difference. Special forces by nature, because they don't hold ground, they have that hunting ability, which means if you need to get game, you need to go out, you need to be seeking, which means there's so much time you need to spend out, constantly out. And it takes a lot of effort to get a man. Luck is not going to be on your side every time you step out. So you see these contacts, but the effort that goes in to get that 30 seconds of contact, hours and hours and days and nights spent just toiling up hills, sitting in ambushes, sitting in the cold, till you get that 1 minute, 2 minute, 60-second contact, firefight, couple of kills. But the effort is too much. When I was there, the place was teeming with militants. Your radio set used to be like a cricket commentary. You start 8 o'clock in the morning, and you'd hear this militant chatter all over the place. And in the evening, the last report would be given to this Pakistani chat there. So, coming to your point, great places. But sometimes you have so much weight. Sometimes you've been walking 13 hours, 14 hours, 15 hours. The radio operator starts sitting down. The RL guy is struggling with the weight. It starts raining. One hell of a man to then sit and appreciate. But I used to carry later stages. I started carrying a camera. I said, I'm seeing something which I'll never see again, and I should capture it. No. And I did manage to capture a big firefight. I mean, it's very difficult to see that there's a firefight happening because those old cameras which you carry in your dungaree, but there's a house burning and a couple of bodies lying around, some militants lying around, for whatever it's worth.
Is there a reality of Kashmir that you would like to highlight for the urban Indian youth listening into this podcast? Because again, a lot of them only get their information from news sources, which I feel in the modern day you can't rely on. So what does a soldier have to say who served there? And I'm sure you're also in touch with the soldiers who are currently serving there. As far as I understand the situation from soldiers, it's gotten cleaner over time. And it's heading towards a place of the conflict being resolved to a certain degree. But what's the truth?
I often tell this to people. I've been called for a couple of other talks. And I often tell people that You go to Kashmir now, you can sail down in a shikara, you can go anywhere you feel like, and you tend to forget the effort, the toil, the loss of blood that has gone into making this, where you can now go anywhere in Kashmir. It's so peaceful, so safe, barring Pulwama, and they've always been a hot belt. And the example I gave is that in my time, when you crossed Patni Top, you cocked your weapon and you started scanning the hillside. And I recall the SP Kupwara coming to call on us in the Lolab. And like you'd call on someone, you'd probably carry a box of chocolates, sweets or whatever, flowers. Now the SP Saab drops in and he's carrying grenades, loose ammunition, and the reaction from the officer standing there, "Arey, SP Saab, takalluf ki kya baat thi? Arey, main kaise khali haath aa sakta hu?" And when he left, as a parting gift, he was given some empty magazines, a pistol or whatever. Now, I just give this example. Look at the culture then. The SP is calling on you, and instead of getting any mithai or anything, this guy's presenting ordnance, arms, ammunition, or whatever. And the joke used to be in the Lulab that be careful when you till your land because you don't know whose cache you might just unearth. I guess, sir, every man has gone, every boy of fighting age has gone across and got trained and carried a weapon. It was packed with weapons. The Pakis had really pushed in a lot of stuff. But from those days to now, what an amazing change.
And it's been a gradual cleanup.
Of course, sir. It's taken a lot of time.
Do you have a timeline on when Kashmir will be conflict-free, or are we not looking at a conflict-free scenario?
See, now 370s come in, which has been removed. And that has not been viewed by a lot of people locally as something which is good for them. And it'll take certainly a decade, I think, before they see the benefits of things coming in from the center. The elections have to happen. They need to then have a bunch of politicians or leaders who look at the larger interest of the state. So far, just the 3-4 families who are playing around treating it as their own fiefdom. It was more economics of politics. Money is being pumped in, money is going to a few pockets, militancy is on, just carries on and on and on. Nobody wants to stir the pot. This has stirred the pot now. And I think we should see, moment the mindset changes, moment the average Kashmiri understands that integrating with the rest of the country matters. And I think it'll change. It's already changing.
There's been a couple of changes in my own mind over the course of doing so many military podcasts. One is that each episode builds perspective in a very deep way. And that perspective has taught me that our nation is guarded by the best of the best. Like, I think the Indian population as a whole kind of underestimates the power of its own armed forces in general. I would especially like to highlight special forces here, but armed forces in general. One of the strongest militaries in the world. The second big change is I have become aware of the dangers around me and my family. And I'm speaking here as a very primal version of myself. In terms of we don't live in a completely safe world. But the fact that we have the kind of armed forces we have, it gives a lot of civilians hope and security. Like we feel like we're in a safe country.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yes.
Glad
And,
to hear that.
I think with the podcast, this is the intention. I wish to put out the truth out there. So, sir, firstly, big salute to you. I'm sorry I'm not standing.
Well, I salute you also, Ranveer, for doing a good job. You're doing more branding than the army does for itself. And if through your podcast, you have a bunch of youngsters who join the army, save the nation, you've done it.
If you've got a distribution channel like this, you better use it for the right stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing you were doing it.
Yeah.
It's a good thing that you're doing. And in my time, there used to be just 3, 4, 5 people volunteering for the SF in the entire passing out of 300-400 cadets. Now I'm told the response is much better. There's a bunch of youngsters who want to join the SF.
Yeah.
Very good.
I mean, we're just adding to the strong branding of the strong product, which is the military. But that's one thing I want to thank you for serving our nation as a soldier, sir. But the other thing is, on a very human level, thanks for the brotherly conversation. This was a lot of fun speaking to you. Very easy to speak to, and I thought I knew a lot about the SF, and then I meet people like you who just keep adding layers. So what I gained from today's conversation is the whole emotional side of it, honestly. Not too many people
Contacts
speak
and
about
firing, and
yeah.
that's always there in the SF.
Yeah.
There's an emotional side also.
Yeah, and that's what's in it for a lot of listeners who probably may not ever join the military, but are learning from every word that you speak. So you've done a huge thing by like helping a lot of young dudes with the healing process. That's what I'll say.
Thank you very much, Ranveer. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope people enjoy listening
Likewise,
to this.
And I hope to have you on the show again very soon.
Inshallah, as they say.
Inshallah. Appreciate it, sir. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind, Jai Hind. Thank you very much.
That was the episode for today. What I will definitely say is that when we do these para SF podcasts, when we do the military podcasts, we can't give you guys the entire unfiltered conversation because sometimes it's a little too long. That's why the unfiltered sections of this particular episode, just like all our episodes, are uploaded on TRS Clips, our highlights channel for this podcast. I'll be linking it down below. I'll also be linking some of our other Special Forces episodes. I hope you enjoy them. For more episodes just like this, make sure you follow us on Spotify. Every episode's available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. With every military episode, I learn a little bit more about the military, but I think we've reached a point now where I want suggestions from you in terms of questions. What other aspects of the military life would you want covered on TRS? Let us know, drop your suggestions, and we'll be back soon.